With the death of Che, the export of the Cuban Revolution moved to Chile, where, in September 1970, the Marxist Salvador Allende won the presidential elections. Allende's inauguration was scheduled for November. The CIA was concerned.
Allende made no secret of his admiration of Castro, and Castro's made no secret of the fact that he saw this as a great entering wedge to bringing the great revolution to the rest of Latin America. You had Cuban intelligence officers moving down there, setting up bases to work into Argentina and other countries in the neighborhood. Che Guevara had been defeated a short while ago in Bolivia, but here was a real chance to revive this whole effort.
Seeing events in Chile as another advance for the communists, President Nixon ordered the CIA to intervene.
We came too late to the game because the administration at that time, President Nixon's administration, didn't recognize the problem they were going to have about Allende's getting in. And by the time, despite prodding from the agency, that they realized this and authorized that something be done, it was basically too late. It takes a long time to put in what we called the plumbing for an operation like this, getting the agents on the ground, getting the type of equipment that you need, getting the printing presses, getting the money in the right hands, keeping the whole thing secret.
With secret orders from the president, the CIA began to try to topple Allende by any means.
Allende did get the most votes. Then between that time and the vote in the Assembly, a major effort was put on to try and see if it wasn't possible to head him off at the pass.
Helms, who obviously was not in a very happy mood, so he just returned from a meeting with the president and with Kissinger, and he was told we had to take certain actions in regard to Chile. And he said, look, here are the notes I've got. They said 1 chance in 10. The embassy is not to be involved. You have $10 million to spend. You can have all you want. He didn't care about the political risk, and there might have been some other conditions I don't recall. We all looked at each other in dismay because we just didn't understand how in the world we could have a man who was legally elected in Chile, knowing Chile as well as we did, that sometime between the election of September 4th, his installation on 5 November, to keep him assuming power. It just couldn't be done. I don't think the president really cared what we did as long as Allende was not president of Chile. The only possible course of action under those circumstances would have been a coup. The first thing we should do is analyze who were the most coup-minded officers. I think the second part of the plan was to launch the propaganda activities and economic activities or whatever to create the situation for a coup and to assure any coup plotters that we run across that they would have our support. The Chilean military, very professional. They were trained by the Prussians. They were very proud of the fact they are incorruptible and were one of the few military forces in Latin America that didn't do coups. Some people don't do windows, they don't do coups.
However, some officers were willing, and they were sent hand weapons as a gesture of support by the CIA.
I personally ordered the weapons. Our first question is, this is insane to send any military coup plotters weapons. There are a lot of weapons in Chile, and why in God's name do they want some hand grenades and some handguns? But in any event, if that's what they wanted, to be responsive as the president wanted to be responsive, we felt that we should give them something. Boxes were no bigger than this. I opened one of the boxes, and in one of the boxes were a couple of pistols and some grenades, and I sent them off to Santiago.
The guns became an embarrassment when Chile's top general René Schneider, who opposed any coup, was shot during a kidnap attempt.
The moment that the Schneider was shot by the second lieutenant, my immediate reaction, I said, send them back. And we got them back promptly thereafter, in a couple of days, by diplomatic pouch. I was concerned that our weapons could have killed them. And I was terribly concerned we were in any way involved with the assassination, because that was never part of our brief.
The agency knew of the kidnap plan, but we didn't say yay or nay as far as I know. And we wanted to make sure that the military coup plotters knew that the agency was behind them and offering good faith, and that's why the weapons were used, simply as a matter of good faith. And so nobody expected Schneider to get killed in the exercise. The coup plotters themselves didn't want that to happen.
The handguns had served their purpose. Now the CIA had to send fresh signals that they were still behind the coup plotters.
You usually do that by promising money and by promising recognition whenever the coup takes effect and the coup is successful. And that's what most coup people want, is that the minute they have succeeded in their coup, They want U.S. recognition as a political power. And that was in the cards. We could have guaranteed that as part of the program.
The U.S. ambassador, Edward Corey, complained that he'd not been told of the CIA's plans.
I had discovered that the CIA, contrary to very specific orders to it and to all Americans, to have nothing to do with the extreme right-wing organization Patria y Libertad, had indeed had contacts. And I added, and God knows what else, unquote, they're up to. I said that if any adventure of any attempt or any other attempt to forestall the inauguration of Allende were made by the United States, directly or indirectly, it would boomerang on the presidents worse than the Bay of Pigs.
The plot's failure meant that Salvador Allende was inaugurated as president of Chile in November 1970. But the agency continued its efforts to topple him.
La CIA no hay que mirarla como un organismo autónomo. La CIA forma parte del poder.
The CIA cannot be considered an autonomous organization. It's part of the power structure of the American government, hence the responsibility of Mr. Nixon's government in the fall of ours and the end of democracy in Chile.
CIA money was used to support disruptive action against Allende through opposition groups like Patria y Libertad.
Patria y Libertad organization was a right-wing violence-prone organization. We did provide some limited financial support one time to that organization. I would imagine they would be involved in blowing things up, power stations or whatever, depending on what the situation might be. In other words, they were developing a capability to carry out sort of paramilitary, guerrilla-type, terrorist-type activities.
One of the things which did most damage to Allende was a truckers' strike in 1973 for which the CIA contributed funds. The strike brought the country to a standstill, and as food supplies and transport broke down, protesters took to the streets.
Nuestro gobierno fue muy difícil de conseguir dólar, obtener dólar, de tal manera.
They made it very difficult for us or any Chilean to obtain dollar currency, hence all the sabotage operations patronized by the CIA. The aid supplied to the lorry drivers was very cheap for them because the value of the dollar was very high. Immediately after the coup, all the merchandise was back in the shop windows of the great stores. All that was part of a campaign financed by the CIA, as well as editorials in the newspaper in El Mercurio, which contributed to an atmosphere of tension and panic and put a distance between our government and the middle classes, a thing that proved fatal. The whole thing is reckoned to have cost around $10 million in order to destabilize our government. The whole thing was very cheap.
We needed to know what was going on in the armed forces because they were an important political force in that country. So we needed to know what their mood was, what their ideas were, where they were going. So we had contact with the military for intelligence purposes. As we got closer to the September 1973 date, the contacts were telling us that the coup was at hand, that the attitude and the mood within the armed forces was toward a coup.
The CIA stayed in close contact with the leaders of the military, which finally overthrew Allende. The presidential palace was attacked. After some hours, Allende agreed to surrender, but instead committed suicide.
We're talking here about real-time intelligence. Over this channel, there was a report from one officer to another describing how Allende had died, to the effect that he was surrendering. There was a column of his supporters leaving the palace. His mistress was at the head of the column, and he was bringing up the end. And at some point, he separated himself from the column, sat down on the couch, and put his machine gun between his knees and pulled the trigger. When the military coup occurred, I was delighted. It was not my preferred solution, but I was delighted that it had happened. For me, this was an important victory in the Cold War. what we were doing in Chile has to be viewed in terms of the Cold War. We got into Chile because of competition with the Soviet Union worldwide. We ran an operation against the Marxist regime. The Marxist regime was overthrown, a victory for the United States in the Cold War.
What followed was military dictatorship. The Chilean generals pursued a policy of murder and repression against their opponents. The families of the disappeared, as they are known, remember them with photographs and flowers.
I think we had an important, significant impact. I think without us, the Chilean opposition probably couldn't have stayed the course. I think we were very, very influential in keeping them in the fight, not only in terms of the money we provided, but in terms of our moral support to their struggle.
Political action and the rest of it never changes the course of history. It deviates the course of history perhaps 3 or 4 degrees, but sometimes that's enough. It's the difference between getting a bullet in the head and having a bullet go here. The distance is very small, but it may be just enough to make all the difference in the world.
The brutality of the new Chilean regime resulted in questions being asked in Washington about the CIA's role.
I wrote a directive down to our people in Santiago, I remember, something to the effect, I know we may be blamed for it, but nonetheless, we've got to be able to say that we did not involve ourselves in a coup. And we've got to be able to testify to that, and so forth, as to what our line is. Well, obviously, the coup took place. Of course, CIA was blamed for the coup, as I had anticipated. And out of the CIA blame for the coup came the first expression of congressional control.
Chile was just the culmination of growing concern in Congress that the CIA was a rogue elephant out of control. In 1975, Senator Frank Church called the agency to account.
You brought with you some of those devices which would have enabled the CIA to use this poison for...
We have indeed.
...for killing people. Does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman.
What range does it have?
100 meters. 100 meters, I believe, about 100 yards, 100 meters.
As a murder instrument, that's about as efficient as you can get, isn't it?
It is a weapon, a very serious weapon. Well, I thought that it was the very survival was at stake. Because remember, we were in a period of intense political dispute following Watergate, where they'd gotten a president to resign for good reasons, but nonetheless, you'd had an upheaval. You had the anti-war movement, which was very hostile to CIA, for obviously various reasons all around the world. You had the various accusations about CIA and Chile and all the rest of the problems of that nature. And I thought that at the very least, the question of whether CIA would be allowed to conduct covert action was up for grabs. And secondly, that the very existence of the agency was up for grabs.
A federal judge today gave former CIA Director Richard Helms a 2-year suspended sentence for deceiving a Senate committee about CIA operations in Chile.
Richard Helms wears his sentence as a badge of honor. He disagreed intensely with Colby over the decision to reveal secrets to Congress.
I found out that really these hearings were not to get information in an effort to help with the intelligence effort. They were efforts to find people who had done misdemeanors or had done things wrong or had disobeyed orders, or in other words, it was a kind of a witch hunt. And obviously I resented this. In fact, I remember at the time thinking that this was a betrayal of everything that we'd been assured when we set up this organization, that we would have our secrets and would have our classified information and our sources and all the rest of it, and that nobody was going to go digging around in that in such a way that it would reveal sources, methods, and all kinds of information in the public that didn't belong there. And it was a betrayal of our belief that we were supposed to run a secret intelligence organization and we were supposed to keep its secrets.
I don't think it was possible to keep all the secrets. What I tried to do is to distinguish the secrets which were important to keep, such as the names of our people around the world, and the secrets that really didn't need to be kept, such as some of the things that we had done that we should not have done. If I had tried to keep those secret, I would have been accused of a cover-up. I think I did about the only thing that was possible to do. I know there's some people disagree with the way I handled it, and I respect their disagreement. That's their judgment. My judgment is that I saved the CIA.
The CIA had always been an arm of the presidency. The key question now was not so much whether it had been a rogue elephant in the past, but to whom it would be accountable in the future.
It never was a rogue elephant. It was, on the other hand, a organization that too readily followed orders and said, "Can do, boss, can do." And that maybe it shouldn't have said "can do" that many times. It never, never, never was a rogue elephant in its entire history. It always followed orders.
From the days when it planned invasions like the Bay of Pigs, the CIA now underwent a dramatic change. For better or worse, it came more and more under congressional rather than presidential control. Can do, boss went out of fashion.